Welcome to A Mason's Work, the podcast where we review Masonic symbols and illustrate how they can be used to solve problems in everyday life. With your host, Brian Mattox, a proud member of the Craftsman Online Media Network.
So for a living, I help folks write business plans. And one of the things that is really important, and we talk about it a lot in sort of my profession, is that most business plans become shelfware. One of the reasons that happens is because they go through the planning process once, and then they never do the things required to essentially iterate on that plan when reality comes up. When we talk about planning and building agency and capacity and not essentially having it become this emotional sort of tech debt to your own everyday life, we're going to need to understand what a review cycle is, what it looks like, and how we make that work on the relative sort of time horizons we're talking about. So think back to the last episode, that young man who wanted to become a sailor or go rock climbing. Allocating time is sort of one part of the conversation. Reading the environment is another, for sure. That's all good work, but that was done at a specific point in time. There's lots of reality that will happen between the date that plan was established and 6 months in. Not the least of which is the person who made those plans and the person who's executing those plans has changed. So, as we're talking about things like failure modes and the ability to get back on the horse, one of the very first things you have to give yourself permission to do in the planning process is find off-ramps to your plan. I know that's madness, right? I don't want to create a plan that immediately has I'm done with this. However, it is entirely appropriate for every plan of action that you pursue to have a set of conditions by which you believe or you think it's appropriate to exit. So if you build the exit strategy in from the jump, again, that's not failure. That was a designed off-ramp to the plan. You kind of got to have that. You also need to have hey, I got derailed. The situation that I'm in now, I couldn't have anticipated this other condition emerging or this thing happening. Now what do I do? Well, if you've done some of your on-ramp or some of your failure planning and how do you get back on the horse effectively, chances are you've met these situations and you kind of immediately got back on the horse. In a review cycle, when you're busy looking at that plan to figure out, is it working, is it not working, what needs to change or pivot, you want to make sure you note the number of times you were able to use some of those get back on the horse sort of techniques that you had. In the same way, when if you're planning the rock climbing or planning the sailing thing, right, you might have, not been able to meet the challenge. You might not have been able to climb that one rock. Holy moly, I didn't even know that this was a skill that I had to develop to get there. Or, I went sailing and, I found that I had a really traumatic experience because I couldn't get back in the timeline I expected because the winds had changed. When we start looking at these things, we have to be able to, again, count our successes for when we were able to get back on the horse, determine whether or not we're in a position where we want to off-ramp, and if so, that's okay. And then for the balance, we essentially need to treat the present moment as almost like a new start. You're perpetually in the moment you're in. You're perpetually restarting the plan every day. This is an odd thing to think because a lot of folks are like, well, I want to track it on a series of milestones and I want to know where I am relative to where I originally started and all that kind of stuff. And that's fine for looking back and creating a sort of a chronology or an inventory or a history. And it's good stuff, right? So I'm not suggesting you don't do it. But in the planning conversation, where again, you're trying to build emotional resilience over time, you're trying to build capacity over time and agency over time, every day you execute the plan is day zero, right? You are in day zero right now for plans you set years and years ago. When you go through this and you start looking at what do I need to do again on tomorrow's time horizon or the one after that or the day after that or the next phase of my life, those plans and designs must adapt. Again, I know that we're not necessarily going to always be able to do that. Some things, like if you are literally designing a building, you've got to have a line in the sand on some stuff. However, what we often run into in our own plan and designing process, because of the emotional nature of being a human being, and because the environment is always just a little bit different, we have to be able to be at day zero and be okay with that every time we review our plan. That allows us to essentially take in all the environmental criteria of legitimately what's going on right now against what you've already successfully achieved and what you've struggled with, and rebuild and build a stronger plan moving forward. As you go through this process, you're going to find there's a ton of opportunities to, again, build new off-ramps, build new on-ramps, but you become agile in the present moment, because really that's all you have is the present moment anyway, right? These are a series of present moments that emerge one after the next. And in that planning process, you're going to take the best information you can right now to build a plan that the next version of yourself is going to have the most likely potential to execute.
The views represented in this podcast are those of the speaker alone and are not representative of any grand or subordinate lodge.
Hi, Brian here. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any suggestions or guidance for further episodes you'd like to see or hear, whatever the case may be, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at amasonswork.com, and we will try and incorporate your suggestions into a future recording. Thanks.
Freemasonry teaches us that the true work is within, a lifelong journey of reflection, discipline, and discovery. At A Mason's Work, we help Masons bring out their best selves through meaningful self-inquiry and symbolic practice. From personal reflection to lodge engagement, we offer tools that turn symbols into action. Visit us at amasonswork.com. The work is within. The time is now.